The first piece I will share tonight is part of a short story collection I'm working on called Burn Down the Neighborhood. It is about the first house my parents bought after living in trailers nearly their entire married life up to that point. There is no judgment in trailer living, but in most cases, even if you own the trailer, there is a sense of impermanence that is tied to it, since you do not usually have any claim to the land where it sits. Finding a deeper sense of place and revisiting that throughout life is an overarching theme for what I will be reading tonight. Here we go. March 13th, 1987. I remember my father laying the newspaper on the dining room table. Our neighborhood, Rawhide Village, was built on a hill, really a sand dune 8 miles outside of Gillette, Wyoming. Although the land rises and falls in the sand-covered hills, the true landmarks were the monolithic coal mines that dotted the horizon. At the bottom of the hill was a drainage creek that snaked its way behind the houses that ended our island of civilization in the vast surrounding prairie. 100 yards from our house was the pump house that supplied water to our neighborhood. The pump house appeared to be a small building that emitted a constant low hum. But once you entered the door onto the steel slatted floor, it suspended you a story above the pump housing. The low hum became a monstrous, deafening roar. A jumble of conduit and pipe awaited you at the bottom of the stairs. After worming your way through them, you reached the spot where my father took out the small blue plastic case that held his water testing kit. He tested the pH levels, chlorine levels, and maintained and tested the sewer on the outskirts of our neighborhood. That is why the newspaper was purchased and set on the table, why I remember looking at the front page. The picture of a beautiful woman sitting in her yard with a toddler resting on her knee, and above her the headline, Rawhide Water, Mom blames subdivision's water for son's sudden illness. Everyone in our subdivision had been on edge since residents started noticing the methane gas seeping. Once hydrogen sulfide gas was discovered, the first house was evacuated. We were all concerned about health. Local doctors encouraged pregnant women to evacuate the neighborhood. The mother in the article, Donna, was one of several families that voluntarily evacuated. According to the article, she returned to her home to do laundry. Her 23-month-old son, Tommy, had a snack. While they were waiting, she gave him some water from the tap. Soon afterward, he began vomiting and fell into a deep sleep that his mother had trouble rousing him from. She called poison control and took him to the emergency room. They tested him and ruled out him accidentally taking any medication. The news story turned a seemingly natural occurring problem that many of our neighbors were facing into a possible man-made problem. If it turned out to be a problem with the drinking water, my father would be held completely responsible. Until this story came out, my family was oblivious to the problems people were facing 6 blocks away. Tommy's older brother, Billy, was a grade below me in school. I never had a class with him, but his grade had a bathroom break right before us. Billy came from a large family, or at least that is what I thought. It seemed that there must have been 10 kids in his family. Anytime I went by their house, it seemed like every opening had a child looking out or going in or running by. The thing I remember most about Billy is that when he used the urinal, he always pulled his pants down to his knees. So when you rounded the wall that separated the sinks and the urinals, you're always surprised by Billy's ass staring back at you. This habit got him picked on. So too, I think, did the news article. Ever since the first house in our neighborhood was evacuated, everyone was looking for someone to blame. I didn't know at the time that methane and hydrogen sulfide gases were seeping out of the ground into people's homes, and that the county, state, and federal government were testing multiple areas in our neighborhood to determine if the gases had reached dangerous levels. All I knew at the time was that this lady had a sick kid and was blaming it on the water, and if she had her way, the whole neighborhood would be condemned. there were other kids in my class that heard the same thing from their parents. We were wrong, though. The people that were scared, the county, state, and feds were all wrong. The news story just happened at a time when things started taking a turn for the worst. It was an omen of the dangers that lay underneath our neighborhood and in the minds of men. The pace of our neighborhood's descent to destruction started to build an unstoppable momentum to annihilation. Tommy's illness, although never attributed to the gases, relayed to all of the families in Rawhide Village the danger of living there, the tragedies that awaited them when they turned on the tap or forgot to open their windows at night to aid in ventilating the gases that may have seeped into their basements. Out of 215 homes, 33 had already been evacuated, and a 10-foot long pipe broke the pattern of roof lines with its flaming crown of hydrogen sulfide burning eternally. Each day brought it with it more questions and no answers. The county evacuated the family most affected by the seeping gas and gave them a $400 stipend that was to aid them in finding shelter for the month. They were directed to stay away from their homes. Many of them never lived in their homes again. This was really the beginning of my family losing their first home and the struggle over a couple of years to find stable housing. The neighborhood I lived in Gillette, was actually, it was from dewatering the coal beds near our neighborhood, and it was the first place that was tested to see if gathering natural gas was commercially viable. So that was the beginning of the natural gas movement in the state of Wyoming, and really for the United States in the late 80s. So that's just a little side point. So, you know, it's a true story, and it really happened in the 80s and 90s. The next piece is about finding a place that I enjoy in the academic community. A few weeks ago, I was attending the International Hemingway Society Conference in Toronto, Canada. It is a biannual conference that has taken place in cities all over the world. I use it as a time to think and reflect, not just about Ernest Hemingway, but lots of things. When most people ask me about it, I tell them it's a super nerdy Comic-Con that only 300 people attend. I say this partly because it's true, and some because it's my utopian space. It is a place where I can spend a week talking about things that intrigue a small group. The discussions are usually based on an educated curiosity. I have found a connection with this group of scholars because were welcoming to me, and we enjoy being curious about things together. Also, I mean, there's always beer afterwards. That's important in a scholarly group. What follows is an essay I wrote about my first experience with the Hemingway book. This will appear at a later date on the Hemingway Society blog. Hemingway at first glance. From what I've heard from many, coming to Hemingway begins with a bit of rebellion. For some, it is a drastic shift from a major like molecular biology to English, not because of inability, but for curiosity's sake. There comes with this change a sense of adventure, a challenge to explore difficult questions about what makes us human. Since the 7th grade, I had been honing my skills as a juvenile delinquent, and by my sophomore year in my rural eastern Nebraskan town, I'd become a singular expert in the K-12 student body of 500 souls. So much so that the structure of consequences at my school were changed. It was really caused by a mathematical problem. If you pay X teacher for 1 extra hour a day for detention duty, and that number is less than the amount of detention student Y gets in an average week, it equals a surplus of student detention time unfunded. Expulsion was considered, but my diverse vexatious behaviors through the day taxed a system that was created for major events. The solution and cost-saving measure was to put me to work with the custodian. Although I was largely unsupervised, which to me at the time seemed counterintuitive, this change allowed for the school to match the amount of time sufficient to meet my detention accrual. Sometimes I stayed at school past 5 in the evening, doing any number of duties. Scraping gum was a common one. While vacuuming the library one day, I noticed an interesting title, For Whom the Bell Tolls. This was of particular interest to me because the title was the exact same as a song by the band Metallica on their 1984 album, Ride the Lightning. I enjoyed Metallica immensely at the time because it was my oldest brother's favorite band, a band my parents despised and frequently confiscated from our Walkman to destroy. I thought this book might lead to some new insights on Metallica's influences, so I stole it. The edition that I stole was 471 pages. At the time, I was not fond of long books after being given Gone with the Wind to read during my pre-janitorial detentions. Non-religious books were scarce at home, so I thought it would be handy if I ever got bored. As a point of honor, I did check the library card, and it had not been checked out in over 4 years, so it's fair game. Despite my troubles with some undeserved grace from an English teacher, I managed to graduate. No one in my family expected me to graduate, so there was no real party except probably in the teacher's lounge at my school. My parents bought me the thoughtful gift of a blanket, and my aunt bought me a nice piece of luggage. As my already tenuous relationship with my parents continued to fray, I decided to move out. At the time, I had not read the Pilford Hemingway novel and would not for some time. During that time, I lived with my brothers in Colorado. They had a falling out and parted. I stayed on with my oldest brother. We had a falling out, and I ended up homeless. That journey is another story entirely. Though, through it all, for some reason I kept the book. It fit well into the pocket of my oversized canvas army surplus coat. Those times of hunger and desperation are a bit of a blur. One day bleeds into the other. Singular thoughts seem to haunt you for days. When will I eat? Where can I safely sleep? I finally read the book. I'm not sure if it was a catalyst for calling my estranged father, or if I read it when I got back to his house in Casper, Wyoming. Something did strike me, though, when I read that book. As the main character, Robert Jordan, considers the time he has remaining and time he will have with his love interest, Maria, he considers what they will not experience. Not time, not happiness, not fun, not children, not a house, not a bathroom, not a clean pair of pajamas, not the morning paper, not to wake up together, not to wake up and know she's there and that you're not alone. No, none of that. But why? When this is all you're going to get in life of what you want, when you have found it, why not just one night in a bed with sheets? You ask the impossible. That's in chapter 13 of For Whom the Bell Tolls. As I stated before, I'm not sure when exactly I read this, whether it was a catalyst for calling my father for help or not. It was a catalyst to seek something more, if not the comfort of a companion, at least a place to call home. Many times I have been offered the life of a nomad, as a musician, as a criminal, as an adventurer, as someone equipped to survive whatever befalls me. I have lived in those modes temporarily out of circumstance or desperation. That passage, though, always stuck with me as something I might achieve, a subconscious checklist I sought to complete. Simple truths, well said, bring us forward, whether in war or in the struggle to understand our own humanity. The longing to have a life of contentment and facing what at times seemed an impossibility still resonates with me. It is a reminder of the hopelessness I felt and a prompt to be appreciative of the life I have worked to build with the ones I love. That's my first part. We're gonna have a little break and then I'll come back, read some more, and then you'll get music if you stick around.